check. Checkity, check, check.
She leans in close, perfume and smoke. She leans in close, perfume and smoke. Voices low as the words she spoke. Her eyes confess what lips won't say. The sax reply. Broken scars. Jazz keeps time on fading stars.
Well, hello there! How are thee? Thou, this, thus. How are thus? Get my camera working again. There we go. Maybe. I broke my mount, so I don't have really a camera mount, so I'm just like freeballing it right now. Meh.
It's not the gin that makes me stay. Is the babe
R.I.P.
that walks my
R.I.P. to my holder.
every quarter wound, every rip.
But we in this bitch. So, how are ye? I'm good. I'm chilling. Had some food. Very hungry today. Just trying to get stuff organized in here and whatnot, but I've got some stories. But I have some stories, but I have some stories to play. So, whatever. Whatever y'all want.
No saints, no crowns, just smoke and scars.
Oh yeah, it fucking yeeted itself out of existence. It broke the whole plastic thing broke off. It's just shit. So I think I've found my voice again, and I think it's gonna be in blues. Saxophone whispers on the moon, and finding out. The blues is so easy to play for me. Like, it's so much easier. Mon ami. Spoopy. Spoopy stories.
Saxophone cry. Every note exposes lies.
Well, let me get comfortable here. My lady. Oh, that's my cup. Okay. I wondered why I was blurred. Thought maybe somebody said I was fucking not safe for work. Fuck your work. I'm safe for everywhere.
Sex in the smoke, it tells a scene. Blue nose cut sharp and mean. You can hide, but sound will find the crime you left between the lines. Piano keys drop like rain.
It fits my voice like it's rain.
Drums just echo
Thunder.
someone's pain.
Let me start spoopy story
When the
time.
saxophone takes flight.
Sax is a little more jazzy.
Dress it up with holy hate, but I ain't.
She drunky. She slurring.
Drunky, I love drunky people.
Truth is
Learn a
stranger
little
than
bit.
fiction. And today, I'm going to tell you 3 stories that demonstrate it.
But before we get into those stories,
All right, here's the
if you're a
spooky thing.
fan of the strange, dark, and mysterious
Spooky
delivered in
starting.
story format, then you've come to the right place because that's all we do, and we upload once a week. So if that's of interest to you, the next time you're at the beach with the like button, wait until they take off their sun hat to go run into the water, and while they're gone, fill their hat up with mayonnaise. Also, please subscribe to our channel and turn on all notifications so you don't miss any of our weekly uploads. Okay, let's get into today's stories. On the afternoon of June 29, 1934, a 37-year-old police officer named Captain Alan Falby pressed the throttle on his police motorcycle and sped down a street in El Paso, Texas. Captain Falby's motorcycle lights and sirens were on because he was chasing a speeding pickup truck down the road. But despite the fact that obviously Captain Falby was in pursuit of this person, they were not slowing down at all. So Captain Falby had been a police officer for 11 years, and he loved his job, he loved his motorcycle, and he hated when suspects got away. So he kept his hand on the throttle and kept chasing down the suspect. But suddenly, the truck he was going after slammed on its brakes and swerved hard to the left. Falby tried to slow down, but it was too late. He slammed into the back of this truck, and then he and his bike went sliding across the asphalt for a few seconds, and the whole time, Falby is feeling his body getting totally scraped against the pavement, and the wind's getting knocked out of him. And then finally, when he came to a stop, he was splayed out in the middle of the road, and his motorcycle, his beloved motorcycle, was laying on top of him, pinning his legs under him. And this bike weighed like 500 pounds. And adding insult to injury here, as Falby is screaming out in pain because obviously horrible injuries have been sustained here, he looks down the road and he sees the truck he was chasing, who clearly knew he just wrecked behind them. They're not going to stay and help. They just drove off protecting themselves. And so pretty quickly, Falby kind of assessed the situation he was in. He tried for a second to push this bike off of him, but not only could he not move it, but every time he moved it just a little bit, the weight would kind of come down even harder and a little bit more pointed on his legs, which were crushed, and he had this excruciating pain down there. And worse, he's looking underneath him and he's seeing this growing pool of blood. Clearly, he's sustained potentially life-threatening injuries here, and he's all alone. Like, there's nobody here to help him, and he's totally stuck. And so even though he began calling out for help, the reality was, if nobody came along soon, he was done for. And he found himself starting to panic. Luckily though, just then, two men from down the road came running up to Captain Falby. Apparently they had been sort of behind the captain and were watching him pursuing this truck, and they had actually seen the accident. And so they had pulled over, and they were now running up to see if he was okay. And so right away, without even needing to ask Captain Falby what he needed, these two men saw the situation. The bike is pinned on top of the cop. And so together, these two men were able to lift this heavy motorcycle off of the captain's legs. And as soon as they did, all three of them looked, and they could clearly see, the reason there's all this blood all over the pavement. There was this huge gash in Captain Falby's leg right above his knee that was just pouring out blood. And Captain Falby, he saw that, and he was already starting to feel lightheaded from blood loss, but just seeing this huge wound was totally disorienting. Fortunately though, the two men who had arrived on the scene to help Captain Falby kept their composure. And one of them actually noticed that Captain Falby was wearing a necktie. He had a formal police uniform on that had, a necktie as part of it. And he gently reached over and he told Captain Falby to relax, and he undid his necktie. Meanwhile, the other man, he ran over to the side of the road where this big tree was, and he got a stick, a pretty sturdy stick. And so the guy who undid the necktie, he tied it around Captain Falby's leg above the wound, basically cutting off circulation to that wound, a tourniquet. He tied it off, and then the other guy came back over with the stick, and he handed it to the guy with the necktie, and he took the stick and threaded it carefully through the necktie that was now wrapped around the captain's leg, and he began twisting the stick, wrapping up the fabric as he twisted it, which in turn mechanically tightened that tourniquet around the captain's leg, much tighter than you could do, without something mechanical. Like, this is somebody who clearly knew how to make a real tourniquet out of sort of everyday materials.
Sorry,
They
I'm
tie
back.
off
Oh,
this
God.
super tight tourniquet, they stop the bleeding, and it ultimately saves Captain Falby's life. In fact, by the time Captain Falby actually got brought to the hospital and they took off this DIY tourniquet and patched him up for real, the doctor would tell Captain Falby that, he was about 10 minutes away from death from blood loss. So had it not been for those two guys who showed up and made that tourniquet, he very likely would have died. 4 years later, on December 12th, 1938, Captain Falby was back at work. And he had been, ever since maybe 6 months after his injury. He had just gone back to work, fully recovered. He did have some scar tissue on his leg, but he was basically back to full capacity. And so on this particular day, Captain Falby was on patrol like he normally was in El Paso when he got a call over the radio about a bad car accident that had happened out on Route 80, which is a major road in that town. And so Captain Falby races over to the scene and he sees there's this car that's clearly veered off the road and smashed into a tree. And the driver, or who appears to be the driver, is sitting still in the driver's seat and they were unconscious. And so Falby was the first on the scene. He pulls over, he gets off his bike, he rushes over to the car, and he carefully pulls this unconscious man out of the car and he lays him on the ground. And he sees this guy has a horrible gash in his leg and it's bleeding profusely. But because this basically mirrored the exact same type of injury that Falby himself had 4 years earlier when he crashed his motorcycle, Falby knew what to do. He didn't have, a issued tourniquet on hand.
No, he had a
but
belt.
He knew how to make one. He had a necktie, and there were sticks on the side of the road. So
there
as
you
quick as
go.
he could, he rushed over, grabbed a sturdy stick, took off his necktie, tied it around this man's leg, used the stick to tighten it up even further, and he cut off the bleeding to that wound.
Fucking
And so
tourniquets
at this
are
point,
great.
now that Captain Falby has realized that, okay, this guy appears to be stable now, he's not actively bleeding, he's clearly still breathing, albeit unconscious, but, it seems like he has a fighting chance here. And so he's waiting for paramedics to show up and take this guy to the hospital, and he's just sitting there sort of, happy he was able to be here and save this guy, when he sort of looks at this guy and he realizes something. The man he had just saved with his DIY tourniquet was literally the actual same guy who had saved Captain Falby with a DIY tourniquet.
Oh, no shit. I thought he was going to say it
Had
was...
never even gotten the guy's name. They had not stayed in touch after his accident. They had
I thought
gone
he was going to
separate
say it was
ways.
like fucking
But now
the
he's
guy
looking down at this
that
man
he was
and he's
chasing.
realizing it's the same.
Weird.
One. The guy's name was Alfred Smith, and he would make a full recovery. But when he was
Cheers, by
rushed
the
to the
way.
hospital, they would say, you were within about maybe 10 minutes of bleeding to death had it not been for Captain Falby. So literally, this DIY tourniquet story played out almost exactly the same way with these two guys doing it to each other, but 4 years apart. Later on, Captain Falby and Alfred Smith would give an interview to Ripley's Believe It or Not to talk about the incredible coincidence that saved both their lives. And when the interviewer at some point congratulated Captain Falby on his heroic efforts, Falby simply stated, quote, "One good tourniquet deserves another."
Yeah.
The man who put the tourniquet around my leg and saved my life when my motorcycle hit that truck. After all, one good tourniquet deserves another. And there you have it.
There you go. One good tourniquet deserves another.
Thank you to BetterHelp for sponsoring
That's
today's
fucking
video.
rad.
When I left the military in 2017,
Decent story.
I left carrying
Okay.
a lot of baggage.
All right.
that
Let
I
me.
didn't-
I'm not gonna go on a BetterHelp thing, but I will say, if you need therapy, please get it. Cause Jesus Christ, it helps me. Fuck. I was the helper. If the helper needs a helper, who do you go to? You go to a therapist. So there you go. My little PSA for the day.
10% off your first month of therapy. On the
Going
evening of December
downtown
16th,
and then
1984,
around.
a 24-year-old electrical engineer named Hao Ran walked through the courtyard of a pretty low-rent, seedy apartment complex in Hong Kong. He held hands with his longtime girlfriend, 23-year-old Jen Yu. The pair had just finished having dinner together at Hao Ran's apartment, which
Why
was
am I-
part of this
why am I not doing
complex.
this?
But now he was walking
I'm
his
sorry.
girlfriend
I
across
thought I
this
was gonna
courtyard
start
to
a
the other
video-
side
I
of
thought
this
I was gonna start
complex
playing
where her apartment was located.
this.
And so
Fallout.
Haran always walked you home. The pair had been together for a few years now. They'd actually met in college after a close mutual friend had introduced them, and ever since then, they had been inseparable. And so Haran was just sort of protective of you. And he felt like their neighborhood was not very safe, and so anytime, especially at night, when he knew his girlfriend would be sort of out and about in their neighborhood, he would
Therapy's rad, your mama's not.
And so that's what he was doing too.
Hashtag
Eventually, the couple
yes.
reached the front door of the section of this complex that would lead up to Yu's apartment. And so the two walked in through the front door, and they made their way over to the building's elevator bank. There were 2 elevators. Halron reached over and pressed the up button, and then he and Yu just stood there and waited. And as they waited, they began to hear the familiar sound of one of the old elevator cars clanging its way down the elevator shaft. These were old and creaky and really kind of sketchy elevator cars that both Halron and Yu hated riding on. But Yu lived up on the 13th floor, and neither of them liked walking up that many steps, and so it was sort of like, the only other choice is to ride one of these elevator cars. And so eventually the car came down, the doors dinged, they opened up, and nobody was on the car, and so Halron and Yu stepped inside. They pressed 13, the doors rattled to a close, and they slowly began going up. And the whole time they're going up, neither of them spoke. It was just kind of like anxious anticipation that, hopefully this car will make it all the way up to the 13th floor. And so as they're moving up, they're hearing the car banging into the walls, and it's just so uncomfortable. But eventually they do reach the 13th floor, it dings, the doors open up, and both of them are so relieved when they step out of the car onto solid ground. And they make their way over to Yu's apartment, and the two, they give each other a hug and kiss and say they had a really nice time together. And then Yu, she retreats into her apartment, and Halron goes back down the hallway and presses the down button to go back down the elevator. And sure enough, a couple of seconds later, Halron heard the familiar sound of the elevator car
I
shaking and
have
against the
things
shaft as
about
it made its way up
that
to
I'm
him. There was a
worried
bell
about.
sound, the doors opened up, nobody was on the elevator car. Halron stepped inside, pressed the lobby button, turned around, and watched as the doors closed. And then slowly, he began to go down. And again, as he's going down, Halron had that same sort of nervous energy, hoping this elevator didn't come to a, lurching stop or something, that it just got him down to the ground safely. And so he's going down, it's floor 12, 11, 10, down he's going.
Oh.
And then at floor 7,
Oh,
the car came to
7!
a
That's
stop.
even
It was
worse.
kind of a hard stop, not like emergency status.
That's
hard,
like,
but it was a fairly hard
oh,
stop.
that's
at floor 7.
a
And so Halron
oh,
is
I'm gonna
instinctively
fuck my
thinking,
life
okay,
up,
well,
but I don't
clearly
know if I'm
someone
gonna
on the
die.
7th floor has called the elevator, and the doors are going to open any second here. And,
No, thank you.
Someone's going to get on. But as
No
he's
mas
waiting for the doors to
pantalones.
open to alleviate this sudden stress that, oh my God, is something wrong here?
Yeah,
The doors
wrong.
don't open. And instead, the elevator suddenly lurches down another foot. It stops. But clearly,
Run,
this is not
motherfucker.
normal elevator behavior.
Yeah,
There is
find
something wrong
an
with this
escape.
elevator. Like
Open
his
the
worst
door. Do
fears
something.
Are coming true. And the doors
Do
still are
something.
not open.
Do
and so
a thing.
Halron's looking around, wondering, what's he going to do?
Pry the doors open! Don't be a
He's
bitch!
trying to tell himself that everything's okay. Maybe the doors still will open up, but they're not. And then he begins to smell something. It was almost like a sort of chemical smell. He couldn't really place what it was, and he's sort of looking around, wondering
Something
what's
was
going on
on
here. And his panic
fire.
is rising, like this is a bad situation, has no idea what's happening, but clearly something bad is going on here. And then this already horrible situation gets 1,000 times worse, because he looks down and he sees the floor of the inside of the elevator is now on fire. And as he's realizing the floor is on fire, and that's what he's
The floor is
smelling, like
lava.
this burning smell, he sees his own legs are now on fire. And so in a
Oh, are you
completely
dead?
panicked, like fight
The
or flight
fuck?
moment, Halron remembered that most elevator cars have an escape hatch somewhere, usually on the ceiling. And he looked up and he couldn't believe it. There it was. There was this escape hatch to get out of the car. And so right away, that's what Halron began trying to do. He kind of scaled the walls of this car. He punched open this hatch and he climbed out of the elevator, out of the fire, saving his own life. And so while all this chaos was happening in the elevator shaft, Halron's girlfriend, Yu, was in her apartment looking out the window. And her view was basically the same courtyard that she and Halron had walked across just, 5 minutes ago to get to her apartment building. And it was sort of customary that every time he would drop her off at her apartment, she would look out the window and wait for him to come out the front door, and she would watch him walk back across that same courtyard to his building on the other side. And so you sort of understood how long it would take, for Halron to come down the elevator and walk out the door.
Okay,
but
why
now
can't
it
I
had been,
turn
5,
anything
6,
down
7,
now?
8 minutes, and he still hadn't come out the front door. And there really wasn't any reason for him not to have exited the building at this point. And she started to get worried. And so given the fact that
I'm sorry if you
much
have
like how
trouble
Ron
hearing
was
this,
fearful
'cause
that
I am
those
too.
old elevators in this building were eventually going to get stuck while they were on them, given she had that fear, she instinctively was like, oh my gosh, maybe he's stuck in the elevator. Like, that's why he hasn't left the building. And so instinctively, she left her apartment and walked down the hallway to the elevator bay. And she looked up above the doors, and it showed where the respective cars were located. And she saw that one of the cars was stuck at floor 7, and it wasn't moving up or down. It didn't matter if she pressed the button, that car would not go up or down. The other car would, but not that car. And so it convinced her that Halron has got to be trapped on that elevator car. He's stuck right there. I better call authorities. And so she did. She called the fire department and said, hey, my boyfriend, I believe he's trapped in the elevator. And so just a few minutes later, the local fire department showed up to the apartment complex, and they walked up to the 7th floor.
Well, she
where
did
they
a thing.
believed, this
That's
car
good.
was stuck. Now,
Glad
they
she
were
did a
not in
thing.
some crazy, emergency mode,
All right.
running down the hall to open up this
Now, I
elevator
must-
car. Because they're thinking, it's really just an inconvenience getting stuck on an elevator car. It's not like life and death. And so they just make their way up to the 7th floor by taking the stairs. And then on the 7th floor, they go over to the elevator bank where the 2 doors are to the respective elevator cars. And on the one that, shows the car is stuck on floor 7, it says the number right above the door. They use their tools to pry open the doors to see, the car right behind it. And once they pry it open, they do see the trapped elevator car, and it's not exactly where it's supposed to be. It's not sitting, right in front of the door. It's actually situated sort of below the 7th floor. They can basically only see the top of the elevator car. Like, this car has actually gotten stuck between the 7th floor and the 6th floor. But that in and of itself was not a huge thing. I mean, they could basically mechanically move this car up and down if they needed to, either up to the 7th or down to the 6th to get whoever was on the car out. What they noticed right away, though, which was the way bigger problem, is they smelled and saw smoke, and it was coming from this elevator car, the trapped car. And so the firefighters immediately go into, okay, we got to figure out where this fire is coming from. Is it coming from this elevator car? Is it somewhere down below at the bottom of the elevator shaft? Like, they don't know. But from their perspective, outside,
That's an easy
looking
bake
into the
oven.
shaft, they could see that the hatch, the emergency hatch on this stopped elevator car was open because they can see the roof of this car. And they're thinking, okay, maybe the trapped guy is right in there and we can look down, grab him, pull him out, and deal with this fire. And so they go in, they're yelling out Halron's name, and they look down into this elevator car. They're literally on top looking through this hatch, and they see the carpet inside of this car is all charred and burned, and there's some smoke sort of sitting inside the car. But there's nobody inside the car. It's
Yeah,
empty.
he got
but
the
they
fuck
see there's
out.
blood all over the inside and up on the walls.
There's
and
blood?
then they realize there's also blood kind of coming up
Oh,
through
no.
this hatch, and it's on the top of the elevator car. Clearly, whoever was in this car was badly hurt as they exited out the roof.
Oh,
but now
no.
the firefighters are wondering, like, well, where did he go?
Yeah,
Did he
where the
fall
fuck are
down to
you?
the bottom? I mean, because basically
Oh,
there's just these 2
no.
elevator cars that move up and down inside
Oh,
of this
he
singular
got
shaft.
jigsawed.
There's basically nothing dividing
He got
the 2
fucked up
shafts
2
that
ways.
these elevator cars move in. It's kind of like one big shaft. And so to the side
I
of
don't
this
know if that's
frozen
true or
car
not, but I
is
don't
this
wanna
huge
know.
shaft, multi-story shaft that goes all the way to the ground. And they look over the edge and they shine their light down the elevator shaft because, the car on this side was up top. It was not obstructing their view. And sure enough, there is a man, maybe 1 floor down, who looks very badly injured. He's got cuts all over him. He's bleeding. It looked like his ankle was broken. And he was sort of huddled on this very small platform, basically 1 floor below. At every floor, when you walk onto the elevator, when those doors open up, there's like, a 1 foot long little platform that extends into the shaft just enough that it meets the entrance to the car. So when the car opens up, you walk across this little platform into the elevator, the door's shut and it goes up or down. But if you're in the elevator shaft, each floor basically has that little protrusion, that 1 foot, small platform. And there's the guy, presumably Halron, who is positioned, perched on the one right below them, on that little platform. And so, of course, the firefighters forget the fire, because, that's a separate issue at this point. And
Fire
they go
fuck!
rescue Halron. And so they go
Poo-poo,
down to
yes.
the 6th floor, they open up the doors, They grab Halron, they pull him into the hallway where he is safe. He's obviously in an enormous amount of pain. He's been burned. He's got a broken ankle. He's in rough shape, but it appears like he's going to survive. And
Somebody
so as
go
the
pee on the
firefighters
fire.
placed Halron on a stretcher, and he's barely talking. He's very shaken up. He's just laying there. And so at this point, the girlfriend, she found out
I am not the
firefighters had
girlfriend,
saved her
motherfucker.
boyfriend, and he was on the 6th floor. And so she comes charging down the stairs, runs down the 6th floor hallway to be by her boyfriend's side, and she looks at Halron for the first time, and she just freezes. And she stares at him, and she says, "That's not my boyfriend."
What?
It would turn out this whole elevator disaster was highly coordinated. Because what neither Halron nor his girlfriend knew
Whoa.
was that the same mutual friend who had actually introduced the two of them deeply regretted it. He himself was in love with you, and he couldn't bear to see her with another man. And so this mutual friend, whose name was Liu Wenjong, that night he had secretly waited until he was sure Halron had climbed on the elevator car by himself, and then he had cut off electricity to that car, freezing it at the 7th floor, actually between the 7th and the 6th floor. And then he climbed
Whoa.
on top of the elevator
What?
car, opened up the hatch just enough to pour kerosene into the car
Ain't
with
no
Halron.
fucking
That was
way.
the smell that Halron began to talk about and smell inside the
Ain't
shaft.
no
Like he clearly knew there was
goddamn way.
something off, but Halron didn't realize it was, this friend of his right above him. And then before Halron could even understand what was happening, Liu lit a match and threw it into the elevator car. That was what caused the big fire. But then, when Halron panicked
no
and climbed
goddamn
up out
way.
of the hatch to save himself, Liu was waiting for him, and he stabbed Halron and then threw him off the roof of this elevator car, where he fell all the way down 7
Oh,
floors to
you
the bottom of the shaft,
motherfucker.
where he died.
Oh, this is
The
why I
man
don't
that
trust
was crouched
people.
on that platform, 1 floor below where this car was Liu. And basically what he did is, after murdering Halron, he leapt onto that platform from the top of this elevator car down onto that platform, sort of intentionally to hurt himself, to make it seem somehow like, he was just trying to help Halron, but then, basically fell and hurt himself too. Like, he didn't do anything wrong, but when they looked at Halron inside the shaft, he was clearly stabbed. Then also they knew this fire had been started on purpose. It was clearly arson. And so once all this evidence had piled up and it was pretty obvious that Liu had done it, he did confess, and he was ultimately sentenced to life in prison.
Oh my god. Alright, I gotta figure out how to get rid of... How do I get rid of this fucking... Oh, Z, okay. Fucking hate this.
One evening in February of 1966, a 34-year-old man named Jose Luis Peña walked down a staircase inside of a cafe in Madrid, Spain. At the bottom of the stairs was this sort of basement seating area. It was pretty quiet, only a few people were down there. But Jose Luis, as soon as he was down there, he saw his friend, Fernando Sesma, had already found a booth on the other end of the seating area, and he was beckoning Jose Luis over. And so Jose Luis, who had come here to meet
There we go.
Fernando,
I figured it out.
eagerly walked over towards him. And then before he
Came.
even sat down,
Sorry.
Fernando, who was grinning ear to ear, he held up
Bro.
an envelope and
Wait,
showed Jose
like-
Luis,
like-
I gotta tell you.
No shit. No shit. Can you imagine being like the girlfriend of somebody and being like, you know what, I love you very much, and it doesn't even have to be like huge I love you, just enough to be like, we're cool, and then somebody does that shit because they're okay, I'm just glad, number one, I'm married, but number two, that I was a firefighter and a paramedic, because somebody fucks with me. Ooh! Oh! 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 God! But yeah, that's some shit, right? Fuck! Ah! Spooky, scary skeletons.
About this. So Jose Luis and Fernando were both members of a small club called
aliens.
Leña Alegre, which means happy whale in Spanish, and their meetings were all about aliens and UFO.
Wait. Happy Whale is what your mom is. Your mom jokes are funny.
Inside us.
Oh, what the fuck? That was creepy as shit. I'm too high for that.
Now, Fernando was actually a post office employee,
Ah!
but at night, he was the de facto leader of his club, and he'd
What
always been
who?
fascinated by aliens. As for
Who?
Jose Luis, he actually was much more
Who?
skeptical. He actually kind of actively
Where?
did not believe in aliens, UFOs, or anything paranormal. But about a month prior, he'd had this sort of inexplicable, UFO sighting, or he didn't even know what it was. He was driving along and thought he saw something in the sky that didn't necessarily make him a believer. But he didn't know who to talk to about this thing he had seen. He couldn't make sense of it. And so that's how he had found his way into this group. It was just because it was an outlet to talk about this weird thing he had been through. And to be honest, he didn't know if he'd be staying any longer than maybe the next couple of weeks. He was just here for now. But regardless, Jose Luis and Fernando had made plans to meet up in this cafe tonight to sort of catch up on all things about the club, before their actual club meeting that was going to happen maybe 30 minutes from when they were actually meeting. But as Jose Luis is sitting down, Fernando's got this envelope that he's really excited about. And once Jose Luis sits down, Fernando puts it in front of him and he's like, look, there's no return address. And he points, there's like this strange symbol on the outside of this envelope.
It's
It just
Satan!
looks sort of foreign, like Jose Luis didn't really even know what he was looking at. But Fernando, who again is a full believer, he says to Jose Luis, he's like, I just got this letter and I'm gonna show it to the club tonight because I think it's from an alien. Now, when Jose Luis heard this, he was open to the idea of UFOs being a thing because again, he couldn't explain what happened to him, but he just felt like, give me a break. Like what, an alien sent you a letter? Why? Why would they send you a letter? And he sort of said as much to Fernando, but Fernando, he was ready for this. Like he knew Jose Luis was a skeptic and he knew he would cut this letter apart. But Fernando, he took the envelope back, before Jose Luis could say anything more about how fake this was, and he pulled out the letter inside. And the letter, it was typed out, so it wasn't by hand, it was by typewriter. And the writer wrote that they were literally from an alien race called the Umites, and they'd come from a planet called Umo. And they said that, the Umites had very advanced technology, and they'd actually already been living on Earth for the last 16 years. However, humans didn't recognize them because they sort of looked like normal people. And so this alien writer said, for all these
Like my
years,
ex-girlfriend.
they had been searching for
I
a
knew
true
it.
believer to
Umites.
share this secret with. And
Motherfucking
apparently,
Umites.
the believer they had found was Fernando. Now, Jose Luis could tell that Fernando was really excited, and so he sort of throttled back how much he sort of rained on his parade here, and he just let him have his moment and said, wow, that's really interesting. And then before long, the other members of their club came into this basement seating area inside this cafe. And as soon as they were all assembled, Fernando got up to the front of the room and he held up this envelope and he said, you won't believe it. I got this letter. It's from an alien race. They want to talk to me. Like, can you believe this? We finally have proof.
Your mom's an
the
alien
aliens
race.
are here. And unbelievably, as he says this, Jose Luis is looking out to get the reaction of the other folks in the club to see how invested they are, in this new revelation. And Jose Luis can't believe it when others in this club begin reaching into their bags and pulling out identical looking envelopes with these strange symbols on them. And they're like,
Ooh,
we
no
got
shit.
these letters too. We just got them last night. We brought them here for this meeting. Can you believe it? And so the whole meeting was completely dominated by, talks of the Umite alien race and how, these letters have got to be legitimate. Like, this can't be a prank the way Jose Luis said it could be a prank. Like, this has got to be real. Who would want to prank us? We're just this little group that, investigates the paranormal. Like, why would anyone care about pranking us? And Jose Luis said to them, that's why, because you believe in the paranormal and they're playing into that. Like, you're the perfect target to be pranked. That's why this is likely happening. But pretty much the entire club disagreed with Jose Luis. And they reminded him, Fernando in particular, that he should recall the club's motto, which was to believe everything until proven otherwise.
There you go.
Basically, the whole group was demanding that Jose Luis keep an open mind, because this
Keep
might
an open
be
mind,
the
motherfucker.
exact moment most of them were all waiting for. A little
Hey,
over
look,
a year
aliens
later,
might
in
be
June
real,
of
I don't fucking know.
1967, and Jose
You know what?
Luis
No,
was back
no,
inside of the
I'm
basement
just
seating
gonna-
area.
So, pause. The only thing I know is, number one, a heart can stop. Number two, I can start it again. Sometimes. Number three, Blood sugar is a fucked up thing. Number 4, cancer sucks. Number 6, don't be a bitch. Number 7, don't be a dick. Those are the 7 things that I can state with certainty. Is it if you follow those at some point, you'll be alright. Alright, let's go to the overseer's home. Start this again.
Of that cafe in Madrid, Spain. To this point, Jose Luis had continued attending these meetings of the Balena Alegre. He had thought about leaving a couple of times, especially as this whole Ummite fervor had really took hold inside the club. He didn't buy it, but he had stuck it out and continued attending meetings. But on this particular day, he was here for a very specific reason. It was because he had seen an article in the local newspaper that he knew the club would be really eager to see. So at this point, Fernando actually was writing a weekly column in the newspaper about the Ummites. Because shortly after getting that first letter and all the other members of the club getting those letters, he had written to the news, they had been interested, and asked for weekly updates. And sure enough, over the past year, the club continued receiving these letters, Fernando included, from the Ummites, whoever they were, and he would write these update columns. And really, by this point, a year later, that column had become really popular in Madrid. And so people of Madrid were pretty invested in the Ummites and, whatever was happening there. And also adding to the intrigue was these letters were no longer just arriving on the doorsteps of Balena Alegre members. They were arriving in front of random people's homes all over Madrid. Random people were being contacted by
aliens
alien
exist.
Race. Now, Jose Luis still very much believed that there is no way this could be real. This can't actually be aliens. But the Ummites had basically become the only conversation topic in the club every time they met. It was all they ever talked about. And it increasingly felt like it was a lot of what Madrid talked about. I mean, this was a big deal at the time.
Why would you
but
not?
Today, the reason Jose Luis had brought the newspaper to bring to the group was actually because, they had published something that even to Jose Luis was pretty unbelievable. It wasn't an article that Fernando had published. It was not, another recounting of another letter showing up. It was actually, this newspaper themselves covering what appeared to be a local UFO sighting. And apparently somebody had captured a photo of this, presumed UFO, and that photo had been published in the news. And wouldn't you know, on the outside of this alien craft was that same strange symbol that adorned the front of all the Ummite letters that Fernando and the club members of all people in Madrid were getting.
Stop. Hold on. I gotta go back for a second.
This newspaper themselves covering what appeared to be a
I gotta look at this.
local UFO sighting. And apparently somebody had captured a photo of this, presumed UFO, and that photo had been published in the news. And wouldn't you know?
Wait, you can't fucking see it because the chat's right here. God damn it. Alright, there we go. Look, so it's got the H on it. Alright, and it says real photo from newspaper article. Fuck that. You know what that is? It's a shift knob from a fucking Hearst-powered car. That's not an alien UFO. That's a fake fucking thing. Okay, but whatever the fuck the Ummite thing, and then those fucking letters. I'm just saying, that's weird shit.
On the outside of this alien craft was that same strange symbol that adorned the front of all the Ummite letters that Fernando and the club members and all people of Madrid were getting from these Ummites. It was the same symbol. And so it sort of felt that could be fabricated and sent to the masses. It was like this vehicle in Madrid that had that same symbol, like it had to be the Ummites. Also, remember, it's 1967. And so faking photographs was very hard to do, at least, making something look convincing. Right. And so that's why Jose Luis, he had brought this newspaper in to show the other members of this club, to be like, you know what, I gotta say, this is pretty unbelievable. And, the reaction from the club was equally amazed. They had all already seen this photo. I mean, they are completely locked in on all things Ummites. And so this photo was sort of like the centerpiece of that day's discussion. And Jose Luis found himself sort of admitting that, this is pretty unbelievable and I don't know what to make of it. But by the end of the meeting, Jose Luis still cautioned the group, like, look, I know this looks so real and it feels so real. I mean, I'm bringing this to you. I think this is pretty unbelievable. But there's just gotta be an angle here. Somebody has to be faking this. Like, there isn't a way that some alien species is doing this. This just doesn't feel real to me. But at this point, it was like everybody shut him down. They're like, hey, you brought this to us today. You're the one saying this is hard to deny. Like, this makes it feel real. And so at this point, forget your dissenting opinion. What we need to do as a group is take the news of the Umites and this photograph and all the letters and not just show it to the rest of Spain, but to the whole world. And so sure enough, after that, Fernando began going on TV and insisting the Umites were real, which actually did cause mass panic across all of Spain. People couldn't explain the thousands of letters and that UFO photo, and so belief in the Umites really caught on. And seemingly the entire general public of Spain became increasingly radicalized. Jose Luis grew more isolated from his friends in Belena Alegre, and soon he quit attending meetings altogether. And then shortly after that, he began going on TV, but not to advocate for the belief in the Umites, but the opposite. To say, stop believing in this. There's no way this is real. But nobody really listened to him. The Umite story had really taken on a life of its own, and it was sort of beginning to spin out of control. A few years after the Umite letters began showing up and making headlines, two men had lied down on railroad tracks and basically taken their own lives by letting the train run them over. And police actually found notes in these men's pockets that just said, "The aliens call us." And given the timing of, their deaths, it seemed like it had to be connected to the Umites. Then, two Spanish sisters died in a murder-suicide, and police discovered they had been receiving Umite letters that might have contributed to this crime. By the 1970s, there were also multiple Umite-related cults operating in Spain, and one of those cults targeted young boys. And in the early 1970s, when Jose Luis's own son was 7 years old, that child was targeted by one of these cults to be brought in because of his father. Like, they were trying to bring this child in to be exposed to who knows what, just because of Jose Luis's public stature as it related to the Umites. Now, Jose Luis's son would not be pulled into that cult. He would be just fine. But for Jose Luis, this was pretty eye-opening and terrifying. The idea that his family could be targeted because of this Umite stuff was crazy. And so around that same time, Jose Luis stopped trying to tell people to not believe in this stuff and instead retreated from the public eye and just tried to live a quiet, isolated life. Over the next several decades, people all over Spain continued receiving Umite letters, and nobody knew why. And these cults that, sort of focused on the Umites continued to flourish and continued to believe that absolutely the Umites are real. As for Jose Luis, he really did try to live a private life away from all this craziness, but it was hard to escape it. He would see Fernando on the news all the time talking about the Umites, and he even published a book about it. It was kind of everywhere. But everything changed in 1996. 30 years after the first Umite letter.
Holy shit!
One night in 1996, people all over Spain gathered in front of their TVs very expectantly as there was going to be this special report about the Umites. And when the guest of honor, who was going to be a big part of this special report, came on screen and began talking about the Umites, it truly shocked the entire country. This person explained that in their own lives, they had recently had a near-death experience. And that experience had made them realize it was finally time to admit to the world that they had made the whole Umite thing up. It really was the hoax. They said they had written those first Umite letters and sent them to Belena Alegre because they believed they would be susceptible to believing in the hoax. And they also said they really did fake that photograph that was put in the newspaper of the UFO with a strange symbol that matched the symbol on all those letters. But the person said, after that, they sort of had no intention to keep up the hoax. However, the story kind of took off, and all these copycats began sending their own Umite letters to random people all over Spain, and then the news picked it up, and it was everywhere. And even though this person was trying so hard to literally tell the world that they faked this thing, nobody listened. The hoaxer was none other than Jose Luis. He literally had done this just to show the Belena Alegre how easy it was to get people to believe in aliens and conspiracies because that's what people want. He basically wanted to show them that he was skeptical and he had this UFO experience and he was trying to get to the bottom of it. But everyone's like, oh, it's got to be aliens. And it's like, no, let's step back and be rational.
No.
He was trying to prove a point.
No,
Look, I faked aliens writing to you and you all believe.
Oh, all right. Look. I'm just going to say this. I'm going to say this for you and me. Because we're the only two right here. That is, person, smart. People, as a whole, in groups, are panicky and disruptive. Yeah, and we'll probably kill each other. Alright, I gotta shut my windows because it is breezy as a motherfucker in here. Breezy as a motherfucker. I love you, Diamond, for hanging out with me. I appreciate it so much. I really do. You are a fantastic person, yes? Yes, fantastic, yes. Alright.
Believed it. Like how?
Alright, let's see what happens to this fine, upstanding human.
How are we going to actually figure out what's real and what's not? But he wasn't expecting it to take on a life of its own. However, Jose Luis's confession never actually reached Fernando, because Fernando died years before Jose Luis admitted this really was a hoax. And so he died absolutely still believing that Umites were real. And despite the fact there were at least 4 deaths linked to this Umo craze, and also there were all these cults that were doing who knows what, probably illicit and illegal things, also tied to the Umo hoax, despite all that, Jose Luis never faced any criminal charges. He died in 2014.
What a motherfucker. Okay, alright. I would like to say that is disappointing. Disappointing, because I would have liked to have seen that man hang for that shit. Alright, let's see this one. Oh, it's spoopy. More spoopy.
Have you ever wondered what happens when you die? Well,
Yep.
today I'm going to tell you 3 stories
All right,
that all
I know
give
one of
insights
these, and
into
it's
what
creepy.
might actually happen. And these are not hokey stories. These are stories with like evidence, photographic evidence in some cases. These are
Ivan.
deep, unsettling stories.
They
but
are.
before we
One
get
of
into
them
those
is.
stories,
I know this one.
if you're a fan of the strange, dark, and mysterious delivered in story format, then you've come to the right place because that's all we do, and we upload once a week. So if that's of interest to you, please sneak into the Like Button's house and flip all of their wall-mounted TVs upside down. Also, please subscribe to our channel and turn on all notifications so you don't miss any of our weekly uploads. Okay, let's get into today's stories. On the evening of December 27th, 1984, a 16-year-old boy named John Boulware sat in the passenger seat of his best friend's Jeep as they drove down a residential road in St. Paul, Minnesota. John
Was he sitting in the passenger side of his best friend's ride? Were they trying to holler at me? Thank you. I'll be here all weekend.
John's best friend was driving, and 2 more of their friends from school were in the back seat. They were all talking and laughing and singing along to the radio. It was dark outside and it was rainy and kind of an awful night, but John didn't care. He was way too excited because that night he and his buddies were on their way to see the megastar musician Prince perform live. So Prince was obviously a massive, massive star at the time. And anyone at the time would have been pretty excited to go see him perform live. But this was a particularly big deal for John and his friends because Prince was actually from Minneapolis, Minnesota. which was just 20 minutes away from St. Paul where they were from. So it was kind of like they were going to see their hometown hero. Now, John and his friends didn't expect to become, huge rock star gods like Prince. But there was just something about seeing, this hometown guy achieve his dreams on an international scale. It was just really inspiring. And so again, John and his friends are just so stoked about this concert, like they can't wait to get there. And so John, with all this excitement, he turns around to talk to his friends in the backseat about this concert and how great it's going to be.
Don't do that
right as
if
he
you're
turns
driving.
around, he hears a loud screeching sound, and he whips his head back around just in time to see the headlights of the car aimed at this tree that they're careening straight towards. He screams, he hears his friends screaming,
Don't
they
be
smash into the
dumbass.
tree, and everything goes dark. A few minutes later, a St. Paul police officer named Brian Coyle and his patrol partner pulled up behind the now wrecked Jeep. They'd been on their
All right,
regular
wait,
patrol when they'd gotten a call.
I'm pause this because we gotta look real close at this. So let's get real close at this, shall we? Shall we? Yeah, let's shall.
Call about the car crash. Now, the call hadn't come from anybody in the crash, so they really didn't know what to expect. Now, when Coyle stepped out of his own car and walked towards the wreck, it was raining and dark out, and the visibility wasn't great, but right away he saw there were 3 teenagers who were standing upright outside of the car. Now, they looked pretty shaken up and they visibly had some cuts on their body, but overall his assessment was they were basically okay. And so while Coyle's partner went to go examine the wreck itself, Coyle walked up to these teenagers, and one of them, through tears, explained to Coyle that he had been driving, and he said he had been just going too fast, and he tried to take a sharp turn, and he hydroplaned, lost control, and they hit the tree. And then the driver said it didn't matter, though, how this happened, because what mattered now is his friend, John, is still in the car, and he's not moving. And so Officer Coyle left the teenagers and told them to stay put, and he walked over to the wreck where his partner was, and Coyle, he knelt down, and he looked inside the Jeep, and he saw the other teenager, John, slumped over inside the passenger seat, and he wasn't moving.
Okay.
So Coyle asked his partner, "Hey, have you checked him? Is he okay?" And the partner looked at Coyle and just said, "No, he's dead." And so Officer Coyle took a deep breath, and while his partner called for backup and taped off the scene, Coyle went back to John's friends and broke the news as gently as he could. But of course, they were all devastated. The only thing Coyle could do to help them was to call an ambulance to come and take them to the hospital to get checked out. Once the ambulance had taken them away, and once John's body had been removed from the Jeep, Officer Coyle and his partner began to document the scene by taking photos of the crashed car with a camera. Now, this was all standard practice, and so while they did it, they didn't think anything of it. However, about a week later, when Coyle and his partner were reviewing the photos they took, Coyle noticed something shocking. One of the pictures that Officer Coyle had taken was so bizarre that it ended up in newspapers, not only in Minnesota, but all over the country. Even today, 30 plus years later, people are still talking about it. And when you see this photo, you'll understand why. This is the photograph. And if you look at the top right,
What am I looking at, though? That's the thing. Okay, real photo of the wrecked Jeep. But it's such a shaky photo. But yeah, that's definitely a fucking dude right there. I mean, I am not negating that fact, right? That's a dude's face. There's hair, ear. But what is this and what is this? Like, what am I looking at here? I don't know. I'm having issues here. I think it's creepy, but I'm having issues.
above the Jeep's open door, you'll see something.
Okay, Jeep's open door. So this is an open door? Why is it so okay. Anyway. Anywho's it's
Thing that could just be a flash of light, but to Officer Coyle and so many others who have looked at this photograph, they say that weird apparition-looking thing above the Jeep looks eerily similar to John.
Well, not eerily similar. It looks exactly the same. Don't be a fucking dick. Don't yeah, it's the same. But why is the fucking picture? Okay, The picture is shaky. Everything in the picture is shaky. Right. Like literally, if I come up in this side over here, and so let me use the mouse. So like everything here, that's kind of doubled. I don't know what that is. This, I don't know what, but this is clear as a motherfucker, right? And it's creepy as fuck. All right, keep it going.
Bull wears face, the 16-year-old victim of the car crash. And it almost looks like this photograph captured like the moment of John's spirit departing Earth. Like it's showing his final moment in life, like when he died, screaming as the car is about to crash into this tree. One evening in the summer of 1974, a 60-year-old doctor named Julian Kirchick sat beside his backyard pool at his home in Old Westbury, New York, which is a suburb of New York City. It was a quiet, sunny day, and Dr. Kirchick was glad to have some time to relax. He was a surgeon at a local hospital, and he also had a wife and 4 children, so it was not often that he got a moment of peace to himself. And so Dr. Kirchick leaned back in his seat and closed his eyes and tried to relax for a second, when all of a sudden, he heard something rustle in the bushes nearby. Now, at first, he just figured it must be a squirrel or a bird or something, so he didn't even bother opening his eyes. Like, this is just nature, it's fine. But this rustling sound persisted, and it just wouldn't stop. And so eventually, Dr. Kirchick did open his eyes, and he got up out of his chair to go see what was going on. Now, these bushes were like 20 feet away from the doctor, and so in order to truly investigate, he had to get up and actually walk over there. And so he gets up and he takes a few steps when he suddenly freezes. Because now, when he's looking at the bushes, he sees there is someone standing, basically in the bushes, a person. But he realized this person was not a normal-looking person. The person was wearing what appeared to be this dark, long robe that covered their whole body. And in fact, the robe kind of obscured their face. It was like they were this dark presence just standing there in the middle of these bushes. And so Dr. Kirchick is just frozen, having no idea how to react to this. I mean, does he call?
Hold on. I gotta go back. Hold on. I'll get this back for us.
Few steps when he suddenly freezes. Because now, when he's looking at the bushes, he sees there is someone standing, basically in the bushes, a person. But he realized this person was not a normal-looking person. The person was wearing what appeared to be this
not
dark,
a real
long
photo.
robe that covered their whole body. And in fact, the robe kind of obscured their face. It was like they were this dark presence just standing there in the middle of these bushes. And so Dr. Kirchick is just frozen, having no idea how to react to this. I mean, does he call out for help? Does he, chase this guy out of his yard? Like, what does he do here? And as he's standing there transfixed, this person in the robe extends one of their arms, this long, skinny arm.
Your mom had a long, skinny arm.
Dr. Kirchick towards them. And Dr. Kirchick went from being sort of startled
I will finger your bunghole.
This figure basically looked like the Grim Reaper. And it felt like now the Grim Reaper is beckoning him to come with him, to come die, basically.
Oh. But, let me put this out there. I'm getting a Grim Reaper tattooed right here, holding a coffee mug, looking bored. You know why? Because right here, I got tattoo for Paramedic, and then on the other side, I got tattoo for Firefighter. So I'll figure the bored Grim Reaper would be fucking funny. Hugs and kisses. Me when I see a shadow. Yeet. Nope. Yeet and delete. Thank you. I'm going to yoink, please. Thank you very much.
That was the feeling he suddenly had, and it was unbelievably overwhelming. And so Dr. Kirchick is staring, horrified. He blinks for a second, and the man is gone. Over the next few days, Dr. Kirchick obsessed over what he had just seen.
Well, no shit,
really,
Sherlock.
It felt like he had just witnessed the Grim Reaper, and worse, that the Grim Reaper was like telling him to come with him. Like he was signaling to Dr. Kirchick that his time on Earth had come to an end, that his death was imminent. That's what Dr. Kirchick is thinking. But Dr. Kirchick, he's a surgeon. He's a man of science and reason, and he can't understand how this could have happened. I mean, Even if it was just a hallucination, it was so vivid. It was so visceral. Like, how could this be? What's going on with him?
Why can't I
But
run?
the problem Dr.
This is
Kirchhoff
weird.
had
Oh, I have too
was,
much weight.
who's he going to
That's why.
talk to about this? Hey, by the way, I saw the Grim Reaper,
Better.
and now I'm worried I'm going to die
I
soon.
need
Or
to
maybe
get
somebody in my
somewhere
family's
better.
going to die soon, or a patient is going to die soon.
I'm going
like,
to
who's going to
die.
have that conversation with him? But at the same time that he was feeling increasingly isolated because of this, whatever he saw, he couldn't help but feel like it was real, and it was driving him mad.
Yes.
Like, I'm not doing anything, and something bad is imminent. What do I do?
Yes.
And
Can
so
I
for
have
months,
this?
Dr. Kirchhoff just carried this incredible
I
weight with
want
him
this.
everywhere he went, like
I
this
have the
constant
overseas,
sense of
give this to me.
unease until October of 1974. That month, Dr. Kirchhoff suddenly got sick. He had a fever, and it just wouldn't go away. And so he went to his own doctor for a checkup, and his doctor told him, I got some bad news.
You got
that
cancer.
day, Dr. Kirchhoff was diagnosed with an incurable form of blood cancer.
thank
He was
God you're
heartbroken,
here.
but he
I
was not
almost-
totally surprised. Because for
It's
him,
just so good
this
to
sort of
see
felt
you.
like a validation of what
Let's
he'd
talk
already...
downstairs.
Sorry.
Cozy
Sorry.
as this place is, there's someone I'd like you to meet.
I'd like
we
you to
really
meet
went
my
overboard
mom.
with this place. Feel free to look around.
Ooh, fantastic.
Let me introduce you to Davenport. He's been helping me with some reconnaissance.
A
Keeping an
reconnaissance,
eye
eh?
on Appalachia.
Appalachia?
So good to meet you. The overseer has been so excited to see everyone again. Once you've acquainted yourself with our new arrivals, I may have some field work for you.
Don't
I
feel
couldn't
your
have pulled this
work.
place off without him. Let's talk.
Weird.
It's good to see you, but we need to focus on the inoculation. I know I owe you a sit-down. I'll be quick. Once you're on board, we can catch up, and I'll answer any questions you might have. Now,
Why are
I'm
you
not-
even here?
I'm trying to make sure you're okay. That's my #1 priority right now. For all of you. So please, you need to tell me, is the inoculation finished? You didn't find my tapes? This disease has turned people into something else. You'll see them. The burned skin, the glowing lesions. There's a
no
vaccine
shit,
the
Sherlock.
responders were working on
What?
at AVR Medical. You need to finish the research and get
A
inoculated.
vaccine for nuclear
Hurry
shit?
back once you're done. We've got plenty to do.
Oh, fuck. Stick my dick in you. You know what? Stick my dick in you is my new fucking favorite slam. Yeah, no, you know what? Stick my dick in you. Taking all your shit. Bitch. Make me run all over fucking God's green earth. Yeah, I might be over fucking encumbered, but I don't give a shit. I'm gonna go to find somebody and take it and do a thing and see what the creepy thing's going.
He's seen. Death, the Grim Reaper, had been calling him.
Death!
Now, Dr. Kirchhoff knew why. Dr. Kirchhoff would share his story with newspapers, which is how we know about it today. And shortly after sharing his story, Dr. Kirchhoff would die. Hey guys, I have a really cool announcement for you. So right now, if you head over to shopmrballin.com, you will find increasingly on the afternoon of Sunday, August 27th, 2000, flannel, the multiple versions of named Bruce Leniger, this nifty.
Did I miss
new-
something? Oh, okay. He saw a Grim Reaper and he got cancer. Okay. What the fuck was the pool having to do with it? Press X to doubt.
On the afternoon of Sunday, August 27th, 2000, a 50-year-old husband and father named Bruce Leniger sat in his living room in Lafayette, Louisiana. He and his wife and his 2-year-old son James had just gotten home from church, and now Bruce was just trying to relax. However, it was proving very difficult to relax because as Bruce is trying to sit on the couch and just kind of close his eyes for a second, his son, James, the 2-year-old, has his toy plane, his favorite toy plane, and he is repeatedly smashing it into the coffee table as loud as he can, saying, "Plane crash, plane crash, plane crash." And while, of course,
creepy as
James
fuck.
is a kid, he's gonna be loud and noisy and obnoxious, that's what kids do. But for Bruce, he's watching his son do this, and he couldn't help but be really concerned. Because lately, like over the past few months, James had become unnaturally fixated, not on planes, but on plane crashes. And even more specifically, James had begun having these recurring nightmares, like 4 or 5 times a week, where he'd wake up terrified and he would say he, James, had just been in a horrible fiery plane crash. And it was like every night that was the nightmare. And it was like Bruce and his wife didn't even know what to make of this. Like, where's he getting this from? James was a pretty sheltered kid. Like, he wasn't being exposed to, horrible plane crashes, either in movies or TV shows or books. I mean, he's a 2-year-old. It just made no sense that he was having this recurring nightmare. But what made it even more kind of unsettling is that James wasn't just fixated on the plane crash aspect of this nightmare. He also began to tell Bruce and his wife these weird details about the plane crash, because it was always the same plane crash in his nightmare. He began telling his parents that the Japanese shot me down. And Bruce and his wife
Holy
were like,
shit.
what is he referencing? Like, is this a World War II reference? But again, he's 2. Like, developmentally, it's not something he would say even if he was exposed to it. Like, it just didn't make any sense. Now, over the past few months that this behavior had really ramped up, Bruce and his wife had taken James to the doctor to say, what's going on here? Like, what's my kid doing? I don't understand any of this. And the doctors were all like, he's a kid. Like, it's a weird fixation he's got, but he'll grow out of it. Like, don't worry about it. But to Bruce and his wife, it just seemed like James was not growing out of it. He was just getting more and more fixated as time went on. And so as Bruce is sitting there on the couch watching James for the millionth time smash his toy plane into the coffee table and pretend it was this plane crash he couldn't stop thinking about, Bruce decided he had to do something about this. And so over the next couple of months, Bruce, instead of trying to figure out what was wrong with James that was causing him to fixate on this plane crash, instead of doing that, he began sort of like leaning in and asking James to give him more information about whatever he was seeing in his nightmare. Like, give me all the specifics you can possibly recall. And James would eventually let on that it wasn't just the Japanese that shot him down, it was the Japanese military. And also, the type of plane that James was flying in, apparently, was a Corsair plane. Bruce had never heard of that before, and again, he's looking at his 2-year-old son, thinking, how do you even know what a Corsair plane is? But nonetheless, that's what James said. And so Bruce doesn't know what to do with this information, but again, he's just trying to learn. And so in November of that year, Bruce found himself sitting in the living room, and he had this World War II coffee table book that he had actually purchased for his father, but he hadn't given it to him yet. And he saw James, playing with his plane, smashing it into the coffee table. And Bruce, he grabs this coffee table book full of pictures of pilots and combat and war, and he flips to pictures of pilots from World War II. Because now, Bruce is thinking, maybe my son somehow is imagining a scene from World War II. A pilot has crashed in World War II, the Japanese military shot them down, I don't know. No idea how he got this image, but that could be what he's thinking about. And so he's like, well, maybe I'll just start looking at pictures from World War II of pilots, and maybe somehow or another James will look at this and something will click for him. Bruce really didn't know what he was trying to get out of this, but either way, he called James over and he shows him this book. And he's like, James, do you recognize any of these planes? Like, are any of these planes the Corsair plane that you flew, in your dream? Is any of this stuff sort of lining up with your dream? Again, he's talking to a 2-year-old, but the 2-year-old sort of got it. James looked at the pages, but nothing clicked. James sort of reached down and was just kind of flipping through all the pages, and there was nothing. There was no connection with James. But towards the end of the coffee table book, where Bruce is thinking, like, what am I even doing here? I'm like prompting my 2-year-old to research World War II with me. Like, what is this? What is going on here? But as James is flipping the pages, he suddenly stops. And he points at one of the pages, and he says to his dad, "That's where I was shot down."
Holy
And he's
fuck,
pointing
what?
at the Battle of Iwo Jima.
No
And so
shit.
Bruce, again, he doesn't really know what he's trying to accomplish here, but, clearly his son has pointed out this particular fact that's sort of roughly tied in with the other things he's brought up. He's had this dream about being a pilot who crashes because the Japanese military shot him down. He's highlighting a battle in Japan during World War II where, the Allies were fighting the Axis powers and the Japanese, could have been shooting somebody down. So it sort of made sense. Okay, fine. Maybe my son's dream is about something that happened at the Battle of Iwo Jima. Don't know how this even happens. Don't know how this is possible, but I'm going to do some research. And so that's what Bruce does. He begins researching the Battle of Iwo Jima. Doesn't even really know what he's looking for, but he just wants to see if there's anything connected to what his son has been saying. And what he eventually discovers actually is sort of a relief. He discovers that there is no record of any Corsair airplanes crashing during the Battle of Iwo Jima. In fact, no Corsair planes at all were flown during the Battle of Iwo Jima. And his son James had been saying specifically, "I flew a Corsair plane." Like that was the plane that crashed. And so he's thinking, okay, there's a hole in my son's story. Like he clearly must have latched on to some event
somewhere
somehow.
else.
Somebody said it to him, he heard it,
Nobody
whatever it
knows
is.
where it
and in
is.
his 2-year-old mind, he sort of warped it, and that's what he believes happened, but it's not real. Like he's not actually recalling something that happened in the Battle of Iwo Jima. Like this is just, a false memory or something. However, Bruce was unable to definitively find the names of pilots who actually flew in the Battle of Iwo Jima. He wanted to find if there was any pilots named James who potentially crashed, during that battle, but he just couldn't find the information. Maybe it existed somewhere, but he couldn't find it. And so Bruce had this idea to get in touch with this old veterans group. All these old guys who had served in the Battle of Iwo Jima that were still alive. They were based out in San Diego. And they got together periodically and just sort of had social hours and stuff like that. And Bruce, he goes out to San Diego, and under false pretenses, he basically tells the group that he's shooting a documentary about the Battle of Iwo Jima, and he needs some information, about certain pilots that flew during the battle. He goes out there, and he goes to one of their social events, and he begins asking around, asking if anybody knew about any pilots named James who were shot down during the Battle of Iwo Jima. And basically all the men he talked to directed him to go talk to the group's historian, this one guy who kind of had all the information about what had happened during this battle. And so Bruce goes over to this guy and he starts asking him questions about, any pilots that, were shot down during the battle, do you know? And the historian, he tells Bruce that, during that battle, virtually no planes were shot down. However, there was one plane that was shot down. A single U.S. Air Force pilot was shot down during the Battle of Iwo Jima, and he was killed. And that pilot's name was James Houston Jr. Bruce couldn't help but be truly shocked that the only pilot shot down during the Battle of Iwo Jima happened to be named James. Like, that just seemed like a coincidence that couldn't be possible, considering what his son was saying. And so suddenly, Bruce doesn't know what to make of this information he's been given. For so long, his 2-year-old son, named James, has been talking about how in his dream he's been shot down by the Japanese military during the Battle of Iwo Jima. And now he's being told there was a single pilot shot down in real life during the Battle of Iwo Jima, and his name was James? Like, how is that possible? That just seems impossible. And so at this point, Bruce is really holding on to the fact that his son had said his plane that he was shot down in was a Corsair plane. And this guy, James Houston Jr., who was shot down, the plane he was shot down in was not a Corsair plane. And so Bruce is telling himself, like, okay, this is just a crazy coincidence. Like, this didn't somehow happen to my son. He's not, like, channeling somebody else who died years ago. Like, that can't be what's happening here. This is just a wild set of circumstances. That's all this is. but he's freaked out now. And so he calls his wife and he tells her about what he's learned, and he kind of downplays how much this has really unsettled him, but he ultimately tells his wife, and the two of them decide, okay, you know what, let's just do a little bit more research and just figure out what's going on here. Like, this is just so crazy, we gotta do a little bit more research. And in doing research about James Houston Jr., they discover that James has a sister who is still alive. And so they decide to contact her. Not really even sure what they're gonna say, but they figure, you know what, let's just get in touch with her
Yeah,
and
why
just tell her
not?
what's
Fuck
going
it.
on. Who knows? Maybe somehow she can explain this. Who knows? And so, kind of on a whim, James and his wife, they send a message to this woman, to the sister. And the sister, when she finds out there's this 2-year-old who's sort of referencing her brother's death in some way, for whatever reason, her reaction was to send actual physical photographs of James Houston Jr. when he was a pilot, when he served in the military. She just sent a whole bunch of pictures to Bruce, his wife, and James to look at. Like, there really wasn't a clear set of what do we do now, and so that's what she did. Here are some pictures. And when Bruce looked at these photos, it was like his whole world was completely rocked. Because in one of the photos that clearly showed James Houston Jr., he is standing in front of a plane. And that plane was a Corsair plane. And so at this
what the
point, for
fuck?
Bruce, it felt like the set of circumstances, the coincidences here, were simply too much to ignore. This is no longer coincidence. This is something else. And also, there's one other small detail that now was sort of bubbling up in Bruce's mind. And that was, periodically, his son James would talk about how he really wasn't named James. He was named James III. Just periodically his son
Holy
would say
fuck.
that. Not every time, but he brought it up enough
What?
that it was sort of a known thing, that he was James III. And now Bruce is thinking, James Houston Jr.? That's James II. My son? How could he possibly know all these things that happened to James Houston Jr. if he was not
Holy
James III?
fuck.
James Houston Jr.'s
Well,
reincarnated
ain't
son.
that a
Bruce would
creepy
eventually take his son's
motherfucker?
story to the news, and the family would film a primetime segment on ABC about it. James was soon invited to the Battle of Iwo Jima Veterans Reunion, where he would shock the group with his knowledge of the battle. James also met James Houston Jr.'s sister, and when he did, he called her by a nickname that only her late brother ever used. After that, even she was convinced that her brother's spirit had come back to Earth in James III. If reincarnation is real, James's story is one of the most credible and well-documented cases in history.
That is creepy.
Thank you
as
so
a
much for
motherfucker.
watching. Let me know what you thought of today's episode in the comments.
What do I think about today's episode? I think your episode makes me creeped out a little bit. Huh. Ooh, what is this? Ooh, 3 people's last minutes were recorded. Nice.
Unsettling, so you want to make sure you stick around for that. But before we get into today's stories, if you're a fan of the strange, dark, and mysterious delivered in story format, then you've come to the right place, because that's all we do, and we upload once a week. So if that's of interest to you, please sneak into the like button's house and replace all of their shoelaces with slightly shorter ones. Also, please subscribe to our channel and turn on all notifications so you don't miss any of our weekly uploads. Okay, let's get into today's stories. At 8:30 p.m. on August 20th, 2010, a 76-year-old man named Zhang walked through the streets of New Taipei City, which is a major city in northern Taiwan. Zhang was on the end of an evening walk, and he was making his way back towards his daughter's apartment, where he was also staying. And as Zhang neared the apartment, he happened to notice there was a street lamp right outside with this big poster attached to it that he hadn't seen before. And as he got closer, he saw there was also this picture of this middle-aged woman whose name was Chun Yan Chui, and apparently she was missing. And not only that, she also lived in the same building that his daughter lived in, except Chun was actually a dementia patient, and she was staying on the 5th floor of this apartment building complex where there was this memory care facility, and that's where she was being taken care of. And about a week earlier, she had gone out for an evening walk, this is what it said on the poster, and just not returned. And so since the week before, police had been out looking for her and her family and friends. They were putting these posters up. And it was clear, nobody had found her yet. Now, Jung had never met this woman, but he sort of felt bad for her. And so he found himself staring at this picture and trying to memorize her face, in the off chance that he just saw her somewhere. He could report her to the authorities and hopefully get her rescued. And so after staring at the picture for a little bit longer and sort of feeling bad for this woman, Jung turned and just continued inside the apartment building. And once he was in the apartment building, he made his way over to the elevator. He hit the up button, he waited, and then a moment later, there was a ding and the doors opened up. He stepped onto the elevator, he pressed the button, the doors closed, and then Jung waited as he headed up to his daughter's apartment on the 7th floor. But as he was going up, he noticed he had accidentally hit the 6th floor, not the 7th floor. And right at that moment, he saw that he was reaching the 6th floor, and so the elevator car was slowing down. And so he just was like, oh, whoops, and he hit floor 7. But by the time he hit floor 7, the car had come to a stop on floor 6, and the doors were opening. Like it would need to reset. Doors open on 6, they close, and then he'd go to 7. Like this is no big deal. And so Jung is just waiting, for these doors to open, shut, and go up one more floor. However, when the doors opened on floor 6, Jung is looking straight out, and he could not believe what he saw, and he just began to scream. Around the same time this was happening, Jung's daughter was finishing up her shift at work when she got a phone call, and she saw it was coming from her dad, and he rarely called her when she was at work. So this was sort of confusing and surprising, and so right away she picked it up and she answered, and immediately she hears her dad screaming incoherently. He's obviously terrified, and all Jung's daughter can hear is that her dad is saying he's trapped in an elevator and he doesn't know what to do. And so, Jung's daughter is getting scared just based on what her dad sounds like. She doesn't really know what's going on, but she told her dad, like, okay, I'll call the building. We'll get you some help. Like, stay calm. You're going to be okay. But her dad just continued rambling, and he was totally incoherent. And eventually, Jung's daughter just said, okay, Dad, like, just hang tight. I'm going to get you some help. And then she hung up, and then she immediately called her apartment building's administration and emergency services line and told them, hey, I think my dad is stuck on one of your elevator cars. He's really upset. Can you please help him? And after getting the emergency services to, get spun up into action to go save her dad, Jung's daughter left work, hopped in her car, and began rushing home. It would take Jung's daughter about 40 minutes to get back to her apartment. And by the time she got there, she fully expected her dad would be safely out of the elevator. I mean, he was obviously very upset, but she had called the building. They were on it. They were going to get him out. But when she went inside the lobby of the apartment building, she saw a crowd of police officers just standing there. She didn't see her dad anywhere. And before she could even ask any questions, she noticed one of the officers was on the phone. And clearly, just based on what was being said by this officer, he was talking to her father. Like he was talking to somebody who was hysterical, and this officer was doing his best to try to calm him down and sort of talking through what was happening. And so Jung's daughter immediately walks up to this officer and says, hey, I'm his daughter, the guy who's stuck in the elevator, I'm his daughter. What's going on? I would have figured he'd be out by now. Like, what's happened? At this point, one of the officers confirms that, this really is this man's daughter. And he pulls her aside and he explains to her that, yes, your dad is still in the elevator because we can't get him out. The reality is this is not a normal situation here. He's trapped in there, and really the only way for him to get out is for him to do something really specific. Like us and the building staff, we can't do anything. He has to do this one really specific thing, and right now he's refusing to do it. He's too panicked, he's too scared, we're trying to calm him down, but it's not working. And so Jung's daughter asked this officer, can you please explain to me what you're talking about? Like, what is this specific thing you want him to do? I don't get it. And at that point, the officer kind of composed himself and explained to the daughter, what was really going on inside of that elevator car. And after Jung's daughter heard it, she was horrified, and she immediately understood why her dad was so upset and unwilling to do this one particular thing.
Probably has to cut a leg off.
But would be pretty awful. She got it, but she knew she would have to hop on the phone and convince her dad that he had to do it. Like there was no other way. And so she walked over to the officer who was on the phone with her dad. She took the phone and she began talking her dad through, what he really needed to do here. She basically gave him a pep talk and said, Dad, for me, you got to find the strength and do this thing and get out of there. And sure enough, just a couple of minutes later, the elevator doors in the lobby chimed and opened up, and Jung came stumbling out. He looked horrible, disheveled, but he was okay. And right away, police officers rushed towards him, but they bypassed him and went into the elevator and immediately surrounded something in the elevator car. It would turn out that missing woman, Chun Yan Chui, the woman who was on that poster that Zhang saw before he walked into the apartment building, well, she really had gone missing a week earlier on her evening walk. But everybody thought she got lost while she was on that walk because she was a dementia patient, and so, she had memory issues. But the reality was, she actually did come back to her apartment. However, when she got on the elevator, she actually made the same mistake that Zhang did. Now, she was not trying to get to the 7th floor, she was trying to get to the 5th floor, but she accidentally pressed the 6th floor. So up she goes, she gets to the 6th floor, the doors open up, she steps off the elevator car, and she's immediately completely confused. And for what it's worth, it didn't matter that she had dementia. Anybody who got off on the 6th floor would likely be confused if you had never been to this building before, because the 6th floor was actually a private residence. And the person who lived on that floor was so worried about people breaking into their private residence that they had installed a metal gate in front of the elevator doors. And so unless you had the key to get through this gate, when you got off on the 6th floor, you basically would step onto a little platform that basically is the hallway leading into the 6th floor, and then you'd be hit with the gate. And so that's exactly what happened to Chun. She got off on the 6th floor, maybe thinking this is the 5th floor. She stepped onto that, little narrow strip that you could actually stand on the 6th floor before you reach the gate. And then as she was trying to figure out, where am I? This isn't the 5th floor. This doesn't make any sense. There's a gate in front of me.
Oh, it closed.
The doors to the elevator closed.
Oh.
And she had no way to open them up again because the buttons to access the elevator were beyond the gate. And so suddenly Chun is standing in this narrow space. The doors have closed behind her, and she can't do anything. She's trapped between the gate and the elevator doors. And even though people are using this elevator right behind her, the only person who would come to the 6th floor is the owner of that residence, and they were on vacation. And so for days and days, Chun is just trapped basically in between the gate and the elevator with no one having any idea she was there. She's calling out, she's doing everything she can to get somebody's attention, but nobody can hear her. And after 5 days of this, when the owner of this residence didn't come home because they were on vacation, she eventually died because she didn't have food or water or anything. She was just standing there for 5 days. And so she dies, and then a couple of days later, Zhang accidentally rides to the 6th floor. He's like, oh shoot, I need to go to 7. He hits 7, but the doors open on 6.
Oh, and a dead body comes off.
Chun's body, which had been basically frozen in a standing position, fell backwards onto him, pinned him to the ground. He starts screaming and freaking out. He gets out from underneath her, but her body, which was in rigor mortis at this point, is stiff, and she was lying like a board on the ground with her feet jutting out onto the 6th floor and her upper half inside of the elevator, and so she was blocking the doors from closing. And so Zhang is freaking out. He's calling his daughter. He can't believe this. There's this dead person in here. And eventually police get involved, and they tell Zhang, you just gotta move the body so the doors will close. But again, her body is heavy and it's stiff, and she's obviously deceased. She's starting to decompose, and Zhang basically couldn't handle it, and he was unwilling to move her body until his daughter hopped on the phone and said, you gotta do it. At which point, he managed to lift her up, get her out of the way, and kind of push her off to the side of the elevator car. He rode down to the bottom, at which point the police came in and handled the situation. Now, the owner of the 6th floor residence was not held criminally responsible, despite putting that gate up that created this trap that killed Chun. However, despite that, he would end up paying Chun's family about $97,000 US equivalent just to compensate for her death.
Okay, wait. Just pausing momentarily. I'm just putting it out here. I'm just pausing. All right. I need a break. I don't even know about you, but I need a fucking break from that. So, I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna make me some mac and cheese. Enjoy some blues. I'll be right back. I love you. Love you very much. Hugs and kisses, XOXO. Oh, I've seen gooey people. I've seen gooey, gross people. I'm that guy. I'm the guy that.
Just a glance, and the night forgets to dance. Whispers in the dark, they fade. No words spoken, yet moves are made. Every step, every breath writes a prophecy of death. They cheer until they see my face. Then silence locks the whole place. I don't command, I just remain. And the quiet shouts my name. Whispers in the dark, they fade. No words spoken, yet moves are made. Every step, every breath writes a prophecy of death. It's not the crown that holds my ring. It's a shadow running in their veins. I walk like echoes, sharp and stark, and leave silence where light turns dark. Whispers in the dark, they fade. No words spoken, yet moves are made. Every step, every breath writes a prophecy of death. I woke the night with a silent train. Every step is carved in shame. No saint above, no crown of gold. His iron hands and a heart grown cold. The streets remember the blood I've spilled. The empire stands on the law I built. No prison wash the dead away. I own the dark, I own the day. Black throne, heavy stone. I rule this kingdom on my own. No mercy given, no lie survive. Black throne keeps my fire alive. They bow their heads when my shadow falls. war's the law, it breaks the wall. No higher power, no guiding hand. I ride the fate, I claim the land. Black throne, heavy stone, I rule this kingdom on my own. No mercy given, no speak in fear when they say my name. I call my Lord inside the flame. No need to beg, no need to pray. The dark is mine, it knows my way. Crown in the shadows, I wear it cold. King untamed, a heart of stone. No mercy given, no truth denied. Crown in the shadows, forever mine. Every scar of how I've kept, every soul of dead I swear. In silence loud and fire clear, the crown survives, I hold it near. Crown in the shadow, I wear it gold. King untamed, a heart of stone. No mercy given, no truth denied. Crown in the shadow, forever mine. Remember the night, remember the name. Crown in the shadows will always remain. I walk the alley where silence bleeds. Every step is forged in deed. No saints above, no angels call. I rise alone, I fear no fall. I paid the cost, I wore the flame. Every scar repeats my name. No chains remain, no God's command. I rule the dark, I own the land. Crown of shadows, cold and real. Built from blood, from iron steel. No mercy given, no soul to guide. Crown of shadows, my Lord, my pride. They bow in silence, they hide their eyes. I see the truth, I hear the lies. No turning back, no second dawn. The night is mine, I carry on. Crown of shadows, scars of how I swore. Every foe and fire's been torn. Through the silence I remain. Crown of shadows carved in pain. Crown of shadows, golden real. Built from blood, from iron steel. No mercy given, no sword of guide. Crown of shadows, my Lord, my pride. The night remember, the dark obeys. Crown of shadows, forever stay. I don't beg, I don't explain. My quiet cuts deeper than pain. No signal, no warning sign. But when I move, the end is mine. Crown of silence, heavy weight. Every glance decides their fate. I don't shout, I don't defend, but my shadow rules the end. There I lie, I erase truth. They fear age, I wear youth. No counsel, no trial seat. Just empty streets beneath my feet. Crown of silence, steel and stone. Every breath is carved alone. I don't plead, I don't break, but the night bends where I take. Strong fall out, the wise fall still. The blue night bend to my will. If I whisper, storms will rise. The silence always tells the lies. Crown of silence, endless rain. Every echo hides the chain. I don't lose, I don't forget. I just rule the way I live. Shadows breathe, no crown of gold, no silk to weave. My throne is fire, my law is steel. The fear they taste is the power I wield. paid in blood, I paid in scars. I carved my name beneath the stars. No saint, no God can block my way. The night is mine, it obeys what I say. Empire in the dark, I stand alone. Built from ashes carved in stone. No mercy, no change, just fate in my hand. Empire in the dark. I rule this land. They whisper lies, but I don't break. I've been the world with every step I take. No judge, no jury, I write the law. My silence speaks, it's a blade that draws. Empire in the dark, I stand alone. Built from ashes carved in stone. No mercy, no change, just faith in my hand. Empire in the dark. Every scar, testament. Every night, a covenant. In the shadows, I ascend. Power's price will never end. Empire in the dark, I stand alone. Built from ashes carved in stone. No mercy, no change, just faith in my hand. Empire in the dark. I rule this land. The night. Empire in the dark. Streets still mark my name forever. Empire in the dark. Every scar reminds of pain. No saint above, no light to guide. I built my throne on the other side. They feel my name when the night is cold. I ride my law is carved in gold. No mercy found, no hand to save. I rule the dark from the shadow grave. Iron crown forged in flame. Every whisper speaks my name. No God, no judge, just steel and stone. Iron crown silence I define. I walk ruins, the fire's gone, but every scar still carries on. No savior here, no holy ground, just silent streets where kings are crowned. I paid in blood, I paid in pain. I built my power through the flame. No chains remain, no lie survive. I rule the dark, I keep it alive. King of the ashes, I wear the flame. Every law just fed my name. No one above, no soul to guide. King of the ashes, tonight's my pride. They bow in silence, they know the cost. I never bet, I never lost. My law is written in steel and stone. The world remembers I stand alone. King of the ashes, I wear the flame. Every law just fed my name. No one above, no soul to guide. King of the ashes, tonight's my pride. Every shadow runs so deep. In the fire, truth is born. From the ashes I am sworn. King of the ashes, I wear the flame. Every loss just fed my name. No one above, no soul to guide. Tonight's my pride. In the the city bend when it feels my stride. The dark obeys, I don't need to hide. I paid in pain, I carved in stone. Every scar became a throne. No saint to guide, no God to trust. Just steel and blood, just fire and dust. I'm the Lord of the night. The shadows flame. Every street, remember my name. No mercy given, no soul above. I rule in silence, I rule with blood. They bow their heads when I draw near. My power speaks without a word to hear. I don't forgive, I don't ask why. The night is mine to the day I die. I'm the Lord of the night. The shadows flame. Every street remembers my name. No mercy given, no soul above. I rule in silence, I rule with blood. Every scar, a battle won. Every vow, a rising sun. In the dark, my Lord survived. My empire lives, my legend thrives. I'm the Lord of the night. The shadows flame. Every street remembers my name. No mercy given, no soul above. I rule in silence, I rule with blood. The night is mine.
No bots. Ah. Anyway, sorry I was gone. It took me longer to make my mac and cheese than I'd planned. Um. Yeah. 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 Yes. Yeah. Unfortunate. And I broke my camera mount, so it sucks. Everything sucks. I'm over encumbered. I need to put some stuff in something. But I'm still getting some shit, because fuck it.
settle the score.
Appalachian Sweepstakes! I have been authorized to deliver your prize winnings. Great Appalachian Sweepstakes is not responsible for paying the required gift tax. Failure to do so may be reported to the IRS. Enjoy your prize! Congratulations!
I walk alone where the shadows ride. No mercy found me by these eyes. The city bends when it feels my will. I rule in silence, I strive to kill. I pay the price in blood and stone. Every scar became my throne. No saints, no gods, no guiding hand. Just fire and steel to claim this land. Lords of the dark, we don't obey. We carve our Lord in night and flame. No crown above, no chains to mark. We live forever as Lords of the dark.
Hello. I got a frog. I don't know why I have a frog, but I got a frog.
They whisper fear when they speak.
What's up, girl?
I roll my pie
Hey, dude.
like a flame. No turning back,
Hello?
no second chance.
Hello?
Is mine in every glance. Lords of the dark,
Hello? Are you there? Can you hear me? Hola, ¿cómo estás? Muy bien. Do you have anything at all? Anything at all? Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Yes? No? Maybe so? Maybe? Hello?